Welcome, everyone, to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success, the podcast for sales professionals who want to sell better. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just starting out, make Software Sales Simplified your go-to resource for actionable insights and real-world strategies. Join us right here, wherever you get your favorite podcasts, and we'll move to success together. I'm your host, Matt Long, and I'm joined with my esteemed colleague, Kevin Donville.
Great to see everyone today.
Thanks, Kevin. And together we have over 50 years of enterprise software selling experience. And every week we talk with different sales leaders and industry experts on trends and topics related to enterprise sales. I just want to remind you to like and subscribe to stay abreast of our latest episodes. We really appreciate it. Today we're joined by an old friend and colleague of mine, Marty Funk. I met Marty about 10 years ago, I think now, when we both worked at Domo. And Marty has a long history of sales leadership roles and a lot of big data as well. So welcome, Marty.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Kevin. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're glad to have you. Now, I guess I should address the first thing first about your last name. I won't make any sophomore jokes about it, but I guess the best part of having your last name is that you have the best walk-up music ever when you're doing a sales.
No matter what I'm doing, yeah.
I also played it at the beginning of the episode.
That's right. We should have. It's a lost opportunity.
I'll tell you, Matt, in addition to walk-up music, when you do what we do for a living, having a name so I've been doing this now for roughly 30 years. So we now have 80 years of experience on the call. Wow. Nobody ever forgets me. They may not remember my name. They may not remember what I sold them, but they will remember. Yeah. I remember when we worked together at whatever, at Oracle, you called me when I was at Motorola and you were at Marty Funk. Mm-hmm. It's a great asset. Now, I had to get through junior high with it. So your sophomore joke is really more of a junior high joke.
I see. Yeah, that's something
that tracks, actually, yeah.
I learned over the years is that, when someone has an interesting last name, the first response is to make some sort of joke. And you think you're so clever making that joke, like they've never heard it before. And the thing is, they've heard it thousands of times. And yes. Most people just smile politely. It's like, yeah, that's a good one. But it's...
My favorite is at the grocery store when somebody says, I bet people like to make fun of your name a lot. And I said, not smart people. And then they let, because they were about to do something, right?
Well, great. We're glad to have you and ready to dig in. But I do also want to point out it is apparently Aloha Shirt Friday, or whatever day you're listening. We're recording this on a Friday. You'll be listening to it on whatever day you are. But anyway, just for your viewing pleasure for those that can see the video. So anyway, Marty, tell us a little bit about your experience. You've been in sales for quite a while and also kind of been in a leadership role for quite a while as well. But do you want to just kind of walk through some of your career highlights to kind of get you to where you are today?
So my path was it's hard to say planned, but I knew what I wanted to do kind of at a young age, right? Like I've been hustling and selling since I was very young. And that it's probably because I grew up in a large family. Nobody had an allowance. If you wanted to go and get, new skateboard wheels or whatever it was, you had to go make some money. So I said I've been employed since I was 10. And I mean it. Like I've been working since I was 10. And it was always selling something, whether it was rare coins or baseball cards or my own, labor, whatever it was, have been selling. So I always knew I was going to do that. I got out of college after about a year of bumming around waiting tables and stuff. My brother's friend got me a job at Oracle as a receptionist.
Wow.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Why? Because Oracle looked like they were going someplace. Right? Do the math. It was over 30 years ago, right?
Right.
And they had this deal where they hire college kids. 6 months, you can go do something else. We're just going to put you wherever we have an opening. And they're like, well, you're going to be a receptionist. I'm like, sounds good to me. It's more money than I'm making as a waiter. And then From there, I went into sales compensation, which made no sense. I have no finance background. I was a history major from UC Santa Barbara, qualified to do nothing, and they put me in finance. But that was part of my path. I wanted to meet salespeople. And then I didn't have a lot of confidence in technology because I was a history major from UC Santa Barbara. And then I start to meet these sales reps, and I'm thinking, man, and you guys might laugh, but because you probably had these thoughts yourself. I'm like, if that idiot can make that much money, I can do it too. And here, I'm going to read some of the names of the idiots who I used to compensate. Okay, this is at Oracle Inside Sales in the 1990s. Dave DeWalt, former CEO of McAfee and current CEO of NightDragon. Mike DeCesar, current CEO of Abnormal Security. Hillary Koplow, former head of sales at Salesforce, current VC. Vinny Smith, former CEO of Quest Software. Oh, and Mark Benioff. These were all inside salespeople at Oracle in the 90s. All the idiots I thought were like, if they could do it, I could do it. Right? What the heck did I know? But that was sort of the chip on my shoulder. Then I got into sales and I realized this is a hard gig. Like, wow. I just saw the part of them that seemed like they were impatient. They were annoying. They were, I thought, maybe a little greedy. They wanted their money now. They earned it already. They'd come to my office. They would, sit down and tell me why they wanted their money now and I wasn't paying them properly. And I'd walk them through on how I did. But it was a great experience. I think it was a great foundation for learning why you compensate people the way you do, why or how companies think about compensation to incent. And it gave me a great foundation for both sales and sales leadership. So flash forward, get a job in sales because now I know everybody, played my network right. And a few years later, I left Oracle. I went to a little company called Exodus Communications. At the time, they were a little company. They kind of blew up into the 800-pound gorilla in internet colocation at the time, which eventually became things like Amazon Web, AWS, Equinix, some of these large companies. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it was Exodus.
Yeah, I remember
Exodus
Exodus
went down with the dot-com ship, right? The first dot-com ship, but it was a great experience. I wanted to move into management, probably too early, but it was part of my path.
What was it that drew you to management or let you know that you wanted to go there as opposed to
probably the wrong reasons.
Uh-huh.
Quite honestly, I thought, well, I'm such a great salesperson. I was always crushing my number. And the next spot on my path is leadership. It's what a lot of salespeople think, right? And I was like, well, that's what I have to do. So
did you go that direction because you thought that was the path to getting more money? Or did you just see that as the natural evolution of your development?
It's the latter. And it wasn't more money today. I thought it was like, hey, it's the path to being in charge later on of something much bigger, right? Certainly wasn't more money when I got I took a huge pay cut to do it.
Exactly.
I think I took about $500,000 pay cut in year one because all of my accounts got even bigger the next year. But I started this thing. I was commuting from time to time with the VP of sales, and he asked me a question about team building. And I said, Mike, I don't have a team. I'm just me. And he said, you're wrong. There are a lot of people who get paid to make sure you're more successful. Figure out who they are. So, I had an inside salesperson who supported me. I had a partner manager who supported me. I had an SE who supported me. I had an account manager who supported me. I had 5 different people who supported me. So I actually built a team. I gave them quotas. I built a website. An early website. I incented them. So I gave them a comp plan. Now remember, these people all supported other sales reps, but I built a team and then I published this website with their quota achievement. I gave them incentives like gift cards. I couldn't just pay them cash. The company said you can't do that. So gift cards, prizes, recognition. I published it out to our executives and the buzz, and they would fight to work on deals on my team.
So I guess this is before there was a lot of CRM, was so ubiquitous.
We had
right?
no CRM.
Yeah,
It was
so
Goldline or something like that.
So you're
right?
almost tapping into the inherent competitive nature
It,
of
it was
people, right?
100%. It was
Yeah.
100% of that, right?
Mm.
And I think I finished like 310% of my number that year. And it cost me about $20,000 of incentives. And I probably made $100,000 in incentives. And when the company was growing and they added another region, I threw my hat in the ring and they said, it's yours. And they gave a couple interviews because they had to other people. And so that was the first lesson that I had in leadership was it's more about team building than anything else. You have to have a camaraderie. You have to have a competitive nature. You have to build that competitive nature. It's healthy, right? And you have to have people want to be on your team. You can't have a team if people are looking at the other team going, I wish I was selling for that guy or that gal. So I really took that to heart in my career.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because, a lot of times when you're building teams in other departments, you're trying to get complementary people that will all fill a role or gap. But when sales, I'm assuming you're looking for just top producers, right? Who will go after it. And the personalities may not jive or might clash. So part of it probably is managing that aspect of it, or
Oh,
what would you say would be the key to really having a strong sales team?
so I'm going to answer that question, maybe not the way that it was asked,
Hmm.
but I don't look for the same type of, I'm not trying to look, I may end up with the same type of person across the team, but it's not my intent,
Hmm.
right? I've had teams that have been wildly successful with completely different types of personalities on the team, right? I'm not necessarily looking for a team that all gets along, is a better way of putting it. Um, my job is to understand what dials to turn for each salesperson on the team. Think about, and I'm not going to use their names, but we had a couple people on our team when you and I worked together who
Hmm.
did not get along. They were great salespeople separately. My job is to keep them separated, right? And
Right.
turn the dials that made each one of them successful.
Mhm.
It's it's mental overhead on my part. That's my job. My
That's right.
job isn't to make them all figure out how to manage me. That's too much work. They have too many things to worry about on their part. My job has always been to figure out, and no matter what team I'm managing, and it's just my direct reports, manage my people the way that gets the most out of them. Otherwise, it's failure.
Mm.
It's also ego,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I think if looking back on my career, I've been fortunate to have some pretty good managers. I mean, excellent managers, I would say. And what's really made them excellent in my mind is that they treat everyone differently. Not that they treat them differently in terms of privileges or things like that, but they
Favorites, right?
understand what motivates each person differently, and it's
That's it.
not the same, right? And they give some people a long leash, some people a shorter leash, some people different types of things. It all depends, but it really is the way to get the most out of your team. But
It's I don't want it to sound male dominated, but it's very sports minded,
Mm.
right?
mhm,
You think about the Warriors. Draymond Green needs to be managed differently than Steph Curry. If you treat them both the same, you're not going to get the results you want.
Mm.
right,
And that goes for any women's sports team as well. Any coach, any good coach knows this.
Mm.
And any bad coach, and I think that might be different than it was 20 or 30 years ago in athletics as well, where it was like the coach, you just did what the coach told you,
mhm.
right? And coaches were tough and you never question the coach. And that's just not the way the world works anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting analogy for sure, because I do think it's gone from a very, I don't say dictatorial, kind of approach towards leadership and just getting everyone in line to a little bit more like, let's kind of have not necessarily consensus, but let's be considerate of people and their strengths and weaknesses to make sure
Yeah.
we're leveraging everyone to their maximum capabilities.
Well, it's a different way to get to the end to the goal, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's not about let's all hug. It's really not. If I believe that the best way to get to the goal is I need to go to this individual and say, here's the goal, and I need to be tough on you to get there. And I go to another individual and I know if I'm tough on that person, they're not going to get to that goal.
Do you think those interpersonal skills that you're talking about come up from being in a large family and having to navigate so many personalities and where you are in the pecking order and things like that?
I'll add a second twist. I'm an identical twin. So,
Really?
yeah. So, maybe. I've never really gone deep on that.
Okay. All right. We don't have to do any psychology or psychological profiling at this point. Well, that's really interesting. I do want to shift a little bit
Sure.
into a little bit about the big data conversation. I just happened to notice, as I'm looking at your resume, that you worked with a lot of companies, Informatica, MicroStrategy, Domo, where we worked together,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think a few Internet of Things, IoT company, things like that. I just want to talk a little bit about big data.
Yeah.
I think the term is kind of fallen off a little bit, though the amount of data that we have now is bigger than ever.
Yeah. It's
But
bigger data now.
it's bigger data. That's right. So kind of get your thoughts about that. I mean, what has your thoughts been about big data? Was that a choice to get to those companies, or is that how did you fall into those types of companies and that selling back when you did?
So Informatica wasn't so much like I'm going to go after big data. It was, and I'll say a couple of the places I ended up were more of a good experience with people I knew, or a really good interview experience. Domo, I knew one of the people on the exec team really well, and he said, I was at MicroStrategy, so I had some analytics and data experience. And he said, I want you to come talk to some people here. And I was more excited about Domo than I was about MicroStrategy, frankly. Nothing against MicroStrategy, but Domo was way more exciting it's newer. It had a different vibe, right? But Informatica was more, I think, personality driven and opportunity driven, which sounds funny, right? I met a guy there during my interview process named Richard Steinhardt, and I will give him credit. Fantastic leader, and I just clicked.
It's interesting you would mention that, we're off in that data space, and it is kind of changed, but it's just as important, if not more important now. Everyone's talking about how data is the new oil, right? With respect to all
Yes.
the AI applications that are out there. So how have things stayed the same in that space, and how have they changed relative to like this new renaissance we're having now with AI?
So thanks for that question. So when I got to Informatica, their data integration is like, it's plumbing. It's not exciting,
Right.
but it's critical. It's not exciting. It's critical for all the reasons you want to think about.
Mm.
And it was in the perfect spot for big data, right? When I was at Informatica, what it meant at the time was we've got all these growing data sets in all these different places, and they were runaway data sets.
Mm.
You needed a tool like Informatica, right? Perfect storm. Informatica did great. But then things did change because big data became a non-issue because it just became ubiquitous. Everybody came out with the big data. Everyone was talking big data. Big data didn't mean anything anymore because it was everywhere. And the reality is big data had been around for a long time anyway. Big data and access to data and data in different places. So companies like Snowflake started to take off because they actually had better answers. Dump your data into one place that is actually easier to access and report out of there. So the answer was not as complicated as some of the companies were making it. The answer was a more simplistic answer. Put it in the cloud, right? This new cloud thing that we have, we'll just charge by the drink. Oh, that solves my problem. So now we have this new thing, which is called AI, which isn't new at all, right? It used to be called machine learning. We're laughing because it's actually been around a long time. But this has been around for a long time. What's changed, or I should say not changed, but evolved, is because so much of this has happened for so long, the models have gotten much, 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 much better
Mm.
to the point where now it's like, it's so commercially available and it's so good that, well, now you have to, it's now strategic that you have to be querying all of your data using these great machine learning AI algorithms. Because if you're not, you're screwed.
Mm.
I'm curious how, so back when big data was just a term used, thrown out by everyone, and everyone seemed to have it, the challenge as a salesperson is one, to cut through the noise and to also not use that as a crutch when you're trying to sell, right? And it reminds me very much of how AI is today, right?
Yeah.
Everything is AI. Everyone says, "Oh yeah, we got AI." Before it was machine learning. We got all this stuff in our platform,
Right.
but no
Right.
one could really explain it. How does a salesperson kind of cut through that and differentiate themselves and really get meaningful conversations and opportunities going with businesses?
So it's a really good question because I think what the knee-jerk reaction for most salespeople is to kind of lead with the sledgehammer, right? Running in with the sledgehammer, we've got AI and it does this, right? And the problem with that is, what if this isn't exact? If you're not exactly right on what the customer needs AI to do and associate with your product, then you just smash the wrong wall. So I mean, I advocate this for any salesperson selling anything is just start with questions. How are you using AI today? What would you want to be using AI for? What if the answer guides you to a solution that is, I hadn't really thought about my product in light of that answer. But usually what happens, this is my sort of philosophy of curiosity, right? Is salespeople, not all, but many, tend to ask questions that they think lead to their product or their solution.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get the aha, I gotcha. And that one is, customers hate that because they know it's coming. And when it happens, they feel like they just got trapped. And even though they know they're about to get trapped, and it creates like that, I knew you're going to do that to me sort of attitude, right? Wouldn't you like a car with four wheels? Yeah, that's how they come.
Right.
So the better way to do it is start with some questions that are really broad and find out why the customer really needs not your solution, but a solution.
Mm.
Is there some problem that they're having that actually merits any solution? Because what's worse than, well, let me put it differently. The worst thing any salesperson can do is sell something that results in a non-sale. I know Kevin's looking at me, wondering what I'm saying.
Yeah. I'm
I
looking
didn't
for the
say close
translation. I'm
something.
looking at I'm looking at the closed captioning under your face, trying to figure out that there was a
I'm not
translation.
saying close something that ends up. I'm saying sell something, meaning I'm going to go down this path because I heard things that sounded like buying signals, only to find out that the problem wasn't that big.
Right.
Problem wasn't really worth solving, but there was an aha moment that I latched onto, and I stopped there from my own questions, I ignored red flags. I ignored things that might have told me that this customer wasn't experiencing enough pain, or I didn't ask enough questions to understand that they're fine today.
Well,
I've done it, right?
sure.
We've all done it.
Yeah.
And we forecasted those deals, and then those deals don't close. It's painful. And I know people who are going to be listening and watching this podcast are going to be like, oh, yeah, because we all do it, right? We get the pressure of, we have to have pipeline, we have to have deals in the forecast. We convince ourselves that I heard what I wanted to hear
Mhm.
on my discovery, and I chased it all the way to somebody who said no.
So that you're bringing up an interesting point here. So let me kind of turn this on its head a wee bit, right? So asking questions is how you find out about need, you find out about fit, you find out about the desire and the immediacy of that drives the deal. And the more compelling that the information you find out, the more that sale's going to stick, right? Which is what, kind of summarizing what you were just saying. How can sellers today who are selling data be better utilizing all of the data that's available these days so that when they go in, they're streamlining that conversation and being very targeted with the questions?
I'm going to challenge what you just asked, is what I'm going to do.
Okay. Challenge it in what way?
Because I think streamlining is where we go awry.
Fair. Fair. But what I mean by that is, at the risk of walking in and having a conversation with someone you're selling to, where you're kind of using a very wide field, that can be advantageous to find out opportunities for need. But if it's so broad that it appears that you don't understand their situation, you should understand your ISP well enough to be able to go and be very focused. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about efficiency, so that you're getting an opportunity to dive and dig and get stuff that's meaty and really relevant to a need.
So I think it kind of depends on where you enter the deal as an AE, right? I mean, if you're a BDR, let's say, and you're cold calling, you don't have the luxury of doing research before you make every call, right? The best you can hope for is that you understand the industry you're calling, right? So you should understand a little bit about what are the 3 to 5 challenges that industry faces, and maybe the persona you're calling. That's the best. And if you're not trying to do at least that, you're probably doing yourself a disservice as you're taking on the job.
Right.
If you're an AE, you should be using tools like LinkedIn Navigator. I got Zoom on the brain, but
Zoom Info,
Zoom Info,
right?
Things that will
Zoom in there somewhere,
almost like the technology stack,
right?
Understand the technology stack, because then you kind of got a picture of at least what they're using, and sometimes you can get reps who have been in the business long enough understand this technology stack might often lead to these challenges, right? But I will say a rush to judgment is what gets most salespeople into the most amount of trouble.
I could wholeheartedly agree. And it's funny so here's the counterpoint, right? People will they may have done all their homework, and now they get a false sense of security and thinking they already understand. So they get the first answer, they get happy ears, and their brain starts closing off all of the possible paths you could be going down because they think they understand where they're going. So I understand
100%.
there's that counterpoint, right? That's why I was kind of asking, how can people come up with data? How could they be leveraging what's available in the industry today to come up with a way of doing it so that they're keeping themselves on the rails, and by the same token, being able to get in deep?
Everybody's now thinking, and I've read it a lot on LinkedIn, and I agree with it. And in my own course that I'm delivering, I spend a lot of time on curiosity as a skill, not a characteristic. You have to learn it. We do a lot of script-based teaching in sales, and I'm against it, right? I'm the guy out there who says throw your scripts away, because what scripts do is they pre-plan a response.
Right.
And when you pre-plan a response, you're not listening.
Exactly.
You're hearing and then looking down and going, aha, now I know what I want to say next. Right.
Yeah, you're paying more attention to your crib sheet than you are to the person you're speaking with. By the way, I hold the same philosophy.
So true curiosity, when you actually get really good conversations with your customer that actually build trust. So your customer says, this guy or this gal is listening. They hear me. Like, they hear me, meaning they're feeling what I'm feeling. Is when your conversation and your questions are about wanting to learn rather than wanting to respond. And those are two really, really different things.
Absolutely.
And we are taught in sales to want to respond. And if you think about objection handling and how it's taught in every sales class you've ever been in, it's about responding to objections. They even call it, how do you respond to this objection? What do you mean respond? Listen to it. Where is it coming from?
Yeah. How do you think, there's a lot of now automatic note takers and things today, which I think are great, right?
I
And
do too.
even video recordings so you can go back and listen to it and they do analysis, because I really think that helps the seller be much more present in the conversation because they're not trying to look at notes. I've
Those are
even heard
dream
of,
come trues for some of us who need to, like, I'm one of them.
yeah,
I need to stay engaged.
yeah. So I think that's been a huge upgrade to the sales process that really can help people get much more focused on the conversation. And just like you said, be more curious, genuinely curious about what's going on. Also, we've worked a lot also with salespeople where, they don't really establish themselves as a partner in a sales cycle, right? And I think there's a little bit of an expansion upon this, but a lot of times when there's an ask from their side, from the customer side or prospect side, they're just like, yes, here it is. But realizing that I've seen it a lot, and Kevin, I'm sure you have too, where we're just like, well, oh, that's valuable, right? That's a valuable thing we're giving to them. There should be something back. I mean, what I know you have some thoughts about that, but I'm just curious
I have
what
some
you.
strong thoughts on this, Matt.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I'd love to hear them.
So in my course and some of the things that something I came up with, it literally was an aha in the shower. Like, I've been wrestling with this. So just for context for your viewers, in January I left my role in my last company in order to start a sales training consultancy. I have some fairly passionate views on, as you can probably tell, on what and how to train salespeople. And I'm not saying everybody does it wrong. There's some great sales training out there. I just feel like a lot of it is geared towards large companies that can afford these large sales training outfits. It's pretty expensive. So I think there's a niche, but I'm digressing. The focus that I'm going after, or that I'm presenting, is really around curiosity, skill building, negotiation, skill building. This is not process training. This is skill building.
Mm.
Developing how to develop urgency with your customer, not force urgency upon your customer. There's a big difference between the two, right? But on the negotiation side, you talked about giving things away. I have this philosophy about, you never give anything away, ever. I don't care what you think it's worth. If your customer is asking for it, it's worth something to your customer.
Mm-hmm.
So why would you give it away? Just because you think it's not worth anything. The egregious forms of this are free discounts, right? Customer asks for a discount. Sure, I'll give you 25%. I'm like, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Right? A free discount. It tells your customer two things. One is your list pricing means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
You just gave them a new list price, right? And I've seen as bad as 50%. Two, I don't believe in what my company values. So I don't believe in my company, and I don't believe in my pricing.
I think there's been a lot of bad behavior over the years in enterprise sales with, increased competition and dropping price at the end of the quarter and all these things where we're training customers that I could just hold off and just ask, right? And
Right. So
we've seen it over and over again, but I liked your take on, everything is worth something, because
everything is worth, and I don't,
not like you're holding their feet for the fire or trying to, to get leverage on them, but it's like, hey, that's a great thing. And I'm happy to give you that. But in return, can I ask for this, right? Whatever it happens to be.
Exactly. Acknowledge. So let's back up. So the philosophy that I have, everything is worth something if your customer wants it. And I remind people, you're all really good at trading. You learned this when you were 4 or 5 years old, right? With Pokemon cards, baseball cards, I want your Barbie, you want my hairbrush, whatever it was. you all learned this. You didn't just give somebody something when you were little. You knew it had value. Where did that instinct go? It's an instinct. Take it back. So use that. So right at the beginning of the sale, customer asks for, what do they ask for? What do they ask for from you guys? I want a demo.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? How many sales reps say, sure, I'll give you a demo, because they confuse that with a buying signal. It's not a buying signal. It's a necessity for the customer so that they can learn more about the decision they have to make. What's a demo worth? Well, some companies, it's pretty easy. Sometimes a sales rep does it. Other companies, it's pretty complicated. It requires custom data, server time, on-site even, whatever. So I've come up with what I'm calling a net negotiation score. This was my aha.
Mm.
And a net negotiation score means you actually score. Each company is different, and I'll work with the companies, but each company is different. You score everything that you could give to a customer. 1 to 6. Not super complicated, not 1 to 20, 1 to 50, 1 to 6. Ones are easy things, 6s are difficult or high value. Low value, high value is a better way of putting it. And you also score the things you want from your customer.
Mm-hmm.
And the net score is something you track throughout the deal. So it's easy to track. You've already decided the things that you want, and you already decided the things that you can give. So you and your boss can track, how am I doing on my gives and takes? Now you've created a culture inside your deal with your customer and inside your company of, I don't give anything away for free. Now you don't share that with your customer because it seems a little weird, but you do ask for things. Oh, that demo's going to take a lot of work. I got to do this, this, and this.
Oh, believe me, it
Do
takes
that.
a lot of work.
Oh yeah.
But if I'm going to do this, I'd like the ultimate decision maker to be in the room. And that person is, I don't know who that person. Who is that person, by the way? Like, you start to get information. All right, I have to build a proposal. Who's the ultimate person who's going to sign it? Because I'd like to talk to that person about what they value the most to make sure, oh, you want a 10% discount, additional discount? I want more quantity. Whatever it is, you've determined ahead what you're going to ask for. Ultimately, at the end of that deal, you might say a signature is a 6 because that's the last thing you want, but you want to be close to 0 by the end of that deal is your net score.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you know you have a relationship based on parity. So that when it comes to the end of the quarter or end of the month, whatever it is that you're trying to drive towards, am I going to close this deal? Because if there's no parity in that relationship, you shouldn't be forecasting that deal.
Precisely. And, to your point, those asks are perfect cues for you to be asking for what you need. I want a demo. Well, interesting. Okay, love to give you one. What do you need to see in the demo? What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the cost of failure if you can't address that issue? It's like almost like an open door to walk through to start satisfying those elements, and it's so organic if you just start taking advantage of it. I
And
love that
Kevin,
approach.
information is valuable. You can value that in your net negotiation score.
Um, I love this topic just because, I can't tell how many times, even after a demo, you've gone in and they're like, okay, this is great. What are the next steps? And the AE's fumbling as to what to do. It's like, if you already know what your asks are, kind of how it's going to progress, that you never are at a loss for words. It's like, what the next thing is going to be, to advance this deal forward. So I
Yeah.
think it's really a great tool to use. I do want to kind of wrap up a little bit though, because we're coming up at the end of time. This has been fascinating, Marty. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Me too.
One thing I'd like to ask before we go is just, if there's one key piece of advice you could provide to someone that's coming into enterprise sales or relatively new, what would that thing be?
So back to it's in the negotiation family, okay, and it's, for lack of a better term, it's the walk away. Learn the walk away. I think it was Harvard who calls it the BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Mhm.
BATNA. right? There are 80 to 90% of deals that go into the last 2 to 3 weeks of a month or a quarter don't have one. They don't have an internally agreed upon, what are we going to do if this happens, if that happens? And it doesn't mean walk away. That's the extreme. But there's no plan. If they ask for this, what are we going to do? And that goes back to my trading thing, right? Usually what happens is we say yes, we cave, and then we cave again, and then we cave again, because we don't have any best alternative. The sooner you decide what our alternative to the negotiated outcome is, the more you're going to close for higher value. And I'll give you a little story, if you don't mind.
Please.
The biggest deal I ever closed as an individual contributor, I walked away from. I was at Iron Mountain selling digital backup and recovery before it was a thing. We demoed it. It worked. They were thrilled. The whole IT department up through the senior VP. I got to procurement. Procurement did not want to do the deal with us. And I kept revising the proposal. Finally, I realized something is wrong here because it keeps matching. So I added technology onto my proposal that frankly didn't exist in the world. And they came back a day later and said, he's going to match that. And I said, I got you. You are sharing my proposal. I'm pulling my proposal. I'm out. And then I called the people in IT who wanted it. And I told them exactly what I did. And they freaked out. They're like, Marty, I want Iron Mountain. I said, well, no, I don't want what to do. I can't win. Your procurement department will not select me. 2 days later, I get a call. Check your e-fax and sign the agreement. It was the walking away that won the deal.
I like that, having a plan about what you're going to do before, because that gives you the confidence to be able to stick to certain things or know where your limits are, right? So you're not making rash decisions about dropping price or doing other things that are kind of desperate, right? I'd love to continue this conversation and maybe we'll pick it up some other time, but we do need to go. But thanks so much, Marty. I do really appreciate you joining us. And just for our listeners out there, if people want to get in touch with you to ask further questions about anything about your methodology or what we talked about today, what would be the best way for them to do that?
I would actually, for right now, the best way is just hit me on LinkedIn. And, my LinkedIn, I'm Marty Funk, or it's actually LinkedIn is just mfunk, MFUNK. You message me and I'll get right back to you. I'm on LinkedIn all the time.
We'll also put your profile link in the description for this podcast. Like the Master Funk here. Thank you so much. We really do appreciate it. As we wrap up here, I want to thank everyone for listening to Software Sales Simplified, Move to Success. Kevin and I do have a book and framework around the enterprise sales process as well that dovetails pretty nicely with some of the things that you're doing, Marty, around curiosity and discovery and things like that as well. If you'd like more information about our book or methodology, you can find a link in our podcast description. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this week. We hope you enjoyed the conversation, and we look forward to talk with you next week.
Like and subscribe, guys. We'll see you next week. Thank you, Marty.